Please excuse me, but it seems my car is having some trouble. I received a notification advising me to clear my outstanding balance promptly to avoid my card being deactivated. The customer service representative mentioned that the payment for my usual credit card hasn't been processed yet. I thought I had sufficient funds set aside in an account for automatic payments, but when I checked my bank balance, it shockingly read $2. The only other person who has access to withdraw from this account is my husband. Feeling a rush of urgency, I quickly grabbed my phone to report the situation to the police. My name is Shirley, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a web designer. I enjoy the flexibility my job offers, allowing me to set my schedule. Although I have the option to meet clients virtually, I prefer face-to-face meetings as they help me better communicate my ideas. As project deadlines approach, I often find myself working tirelessly, sacrificing sleep to ensure productivity. My ability to maintain this intense pace is greatly supported by my husband Matthew, whom I married a year ago. We first met a couple of years back when I was working on a project for his company where he served as the liaison. After dating for 2 years, we got married and he moved into my apartment. However, a significant concern has recently arisen involving Matthew's parents. They are quite relaxed about their finances and often run into money troubles. Matthew and I share our living costs equally. Due to my higher income, I pay all our bills at the beginning of the month, and he pays me back his half at the start of the next. This arrangement usually works well for us, but the current financial predicament has added unexpected stress. When I brought up this month's expenses to Matthew as I normally do, he seemed unusually irritated and said, "Look, money's a bit tight right now. Can I settle my share of the expenses after my next paycheck?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the expenses." He replied, "I get that, but I'm completely strapped until my next payday." I was taken aback because it had only been 8 days since his last paycheck. His vague responses and reluctance to explain were frustrating me. I pressed on. "Can you please explain why you're unable to pay? And what's this about helping your parents?" Matthew hesitated, then said, "It's nothing suspicious. I just helped my mom and dad out. They mentioned they were having some financial trouble, so I sent them some money." This was surprising to hear. Matthew's parents were supposed to be financially stable. His father worked full-time and his mother part-time. I couldn't understand why they suddenly needed money. "Why do your parents need financial support if they're both working? This hasn't been an issue before." Matthew admitted, "I've been helping them for a while. They asked for more money starting this month, and I agreed." Although I understood the importance of supporting family, this revelation was unsettling. I firmly said, "All right, just make sure you pay your share by the end of the month." Matthew has always been stubborn, and once he decides something, he rarely changes his mind. While I love him for who he is, this trait sometimes creates difficulties. Knowing that pushing him further wouldn't help, I chose to drop the issue and patiently wait for his next payday. Since that conversation, however, he has consistently found excuses to avoid contributing to our household expenses. This pattern has added a layer of tension to our relationship, making financial discussions more challenging than they used to be. When Matthew does contribute financially, it's just a fraction of what we need. It's been nearly 8 months of him not pulling his weight, and while we are technically still married, my patience is growing thin. I'm left to handle all the bills and household chores alone. Reflecting on this makes me feel both foolish and overwhelmed, hollowed out by the relentless strain. One late evening, Matthew came home, his cheeks flushed from alcohol, and I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. I raised my voice. "Why didn't you call if you were going to be out drinking? I made dinner and waited for you." His reply was casual. "Sorry, a colleague invited me out unexpectedly." I countered, "Couldn't you have sent a message? I've asked you before to keep me informed. It's not fair to leave me hanging." "Don't start yelling the moment I walk in. It's not welcoming," he retorted. I was stunned. "What do you mean? Why am I the one being blamed?" His look of disdain was like a slap in the face, intensifying my anger. I confronted him directly. How can you afford to go out drinking when you can't even contribute to our bills? I'm exhausted too from working every day and handling all the household chores. If you can't contribute financially, can we at least stop sending money to your parents? I suggested. Matthew bristled. What? Why? That's my family's business. It's not your concern. This response stung. And what about us, Matthew? Aren't we family too? What am I to you? We're living here together, married. This is so frustrating. What does it matter? You earn more than I do anyway, he said dismissively, as if that justified his lack of contribution. His sense of entitlement infuriated me further. The only reason Matthew can live so comfortably is that I've been shouldering our financial responsibilities alone, but his recent behavior and attitudes have made me question how sustainable our situation is. As I've been covering all our expenses, I couldn't help but think, would a simple thank you or an apology for the inconvenience be too much to ask? His irrational arguments left me utterly speechless. His arrogance was bewildering. With our tempers flaring, I realized a rational conversation was out of the question at that moment, so I suggested we revisit the discussion the next day. The following day, as I was preparing dinner and waiting for Matthew to return, I heard the front door creak open. "Welcome home," I called out, but received no reply. Then the living room door swung open, and to my surprise, there stood my husband with his parents. "Mom, Dad, what brings you here?" I asked, taken aback. With a smug grin, Matthew said, "My parents have something they want to discuss with you. Let's get to the point," he prompted, urging them to speak. My father-in-law, looking somewhat apologetic, started, "Apologies for the sudden visit. We've come to talk about the financial support Matthew has been providing us." "What's this about?" I asked, confused. "Oh, Shirley, could you please ease up on Matthew?" his mother interjected, catching me completely off guard. "Matthew has been sending us money each month considering our well-being. It's unfair for you to accuse him," she added. "What are you saying? I'm just asking for our living expenses to be managed properly," I replied, trying to contain my frustration. "Listen, Shirley," his father chimed in, "I hate to bring this up, but we're practically family, aren't we? If your own family were struggling, wouldn't you lend a hand?" "That's what anyone would expect, right?" his mother continued. "Your father-in-law and I have been experiencing financial strain lately, so we rely on Matthew to continue supporting us. Therefore, you should handle all the living expenses for both of you." This presumption was staggering. The idea that I should carry the entire financial burden for us felt incredibly unfair. Matthew's parents imposing on our finances without considering the strain it put on our marriage was troubling. I realized this was not just about money. It was about respect and boundaries within our family dynamics. They assumed it was only natural for me to cover all the costs. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally snapped, "Enough is enough. What do you think I've been doing? I manage all the household chores and cover every single expense. How is that fair? Isn't it what married couples are supposed to do? Support each other? Or are you just that selfish?" Upon hearing his mother's scoff, my husband, who was sitting beside me, couldn't hold back a chuckle. That evening, despite my attempts to bring reason into our conversation, they remained stubborn and left well after 10 p.m. Once they were gone, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. My husband coldly handed me signed divorce papers. Shocked, I asked, "What's this?" "It means exactly what it says," he replied sharply. Looking down at me, he added, "If you persist in defying me, I'll end our marriage." "Are you serious?" I asked, incredulous. "Absolutely. If you don't want a divorce, then simply obey. Your role is to follow, not lead." I knew I should have stood my ground, but I felt utterly drained. Perhaps trying to reason with Matthew before things got worse was futile. Maybe divorce was the inevitable solution. The decision came swiftly. The next day, I signed the divorce papers Matthew had given me and headed to City Hall. The documents were processed quickly, and just like that, I was single again. Now, free from the constraints of my marriage, I felt a surge of relief and empowerment. I decided it was time to find my place and embrace independent living fully. Feeling rejuvenated, I indulged in a shopping trip to the department store. Working predominantly from home and with outings limited mainly to client meetings, it had been quite some time since I splurged on myself, especially given the recent financial strain. Today was a new beginning. Determined to treat myself, I headed to the women's clothing section, and after trying on a few dresses, I chose 2 favorites. At the checkout, I handed over my credit card, but the cashier's troubled expression made my heart sink. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we're unable to process this card." "What? That's impossible," I replied, puzzled. "I just used it recently to buy a new tablet for work without any issues. Why the sudden problem now?" Rushing home, I immediately called the card company. After explaining the situation, the operator shared some alarming news. "We require immediate payment of the outstanding balance, or your card will be rendered unusable." Outstanding balance? Last month we were unable to debit your card usage from your account. Could you please verify your bank account balance? Ending the call, I quickly logged into my bank account online, the very account that funds my card transactions, which was initially reserved for personal savings. If my memory served me right, there should have been $8 million in there, but the balance read 0. Just before the card's due date, the entire $8 million had been withdrawn. What on earth was happening? A chilling suspicion gripped me. Could it have been Matthew? But who else had access? Our bank book and ATM card were stored together, only accessible to both of us, meaning Matthew was the only other person who could have withdrawn from my account. When he returned, I confronted him. "Hey, did you withdraw money from my account?" He smirked, let out an exasperated sigh, and replied, clearly irritated, "Oh, you figured it out, huh? Thought I did a pretty good job of covering my tracks." "I can't believe this. Why would you do that?" "For my parents, of course. I gave them your $8 million. "What did you just say?" His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He had given away my entire savings to his parents under the guise of needing financial support. Despite my shock, I managed to maintain composure as Matthew began his explanation, his voice laced with a misguided sense of pride. His parents, it turned out, had fallen prey to the lure of online shopping, their new hobby quickly escalating into an addiction. They weren't just buying necessities, they were splurging on luxuries, accumulating duplicates of expensive items, and even distributing them to neighbors as if hosting some extravagant giveaway. Their monthly expenditures had ballooned to a staggering $750,000, a figure well beyond Matthew's financial reach. Desperate, he had dipped into my savings, extracting a whopping $8 million to cover their excesses. When he finished, he casually remarked, "You shouldn't be upset. After all, they're practically your family too. Think of it as helping out the family. It's just $8 million. No need to make such a big deal out of it." That was the last straw. I dialed the police right then and there, my voice steady as I reported a theft. Matthew's eyes widened in disbelief as I ended the call. He erupted, "What are you doing? Did you just call the cops?" "Of course I did," I shot back. "We've just been robbed, haven't we?" He sputtered, "But this is exaggerating. It's my house, too." I cut him off, standing my ground. "Actually, we're divorced now, and this apartment, it's leased under my name only, so technically it's not your home anymore. We are not together, remember? Those divorce papers you signed yesterday, they've been filed, so this place, it's mine." As the tension escalated between us, Matthew still couldn't grasp the gravity of the situation. "You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report," he pleaded in disbelief. I waved my phone menacingly at him and warned, "If you dare lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't escape now. Why don't you just admit what you've done?" Matthew, looking desperate, tried to evoke our past. "Wait, hold on. We loved each other, didn't we? How did it come to this?" "Love each other?" I scoffed, my voice thick with scorn. "Don't try to feed me that nonsense. Think about it. Whose fault do you think all of this is? It all began because you blindly supported your irresponsible parents. You can't just act recklessly and expect forgiveness. Who would forgive someone as despicable as you? Stung by my words, Matthew attempted to shift the focus. What a fool! Do you really know who you're talking to? Yes, I'm talking directly to you, I shot back, my voice cold and steady. Like parents, like a child. Because you were raised by parents who were careless with money, you think it's acceptable to deplete someone else's savings. I hope the police give you a stern lecture and make you feel the weight of those $8 million. Just then, we heard the sirens approach and the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that cut through the heated exchange. As the police entered, Matthew's bravado dissolved completely, and he crumbled, a shadow of his former self. "Who's the suspect?" an officer asked, looking between us. Pointing at Matthew, now a pathetic figure on the floor, I said firmly, "It's him, without a doubt." "All right, let's go. You need to come in for questioning," the officer commanded. Matthew, his face pale and eyes wide with fear, stammered, "All I wanted was to support my parents." His voice trailed off into silence as the reality of the situation hit him. Matthew was led away by the police and his protests were ignored. However, the saga didn't end there. Despite my clear statement and the evidence I provided, the authorities later informed me that the incident was considered a civil matter. They explained that the legal boundaries prevented them from taking more drastic actions in what was essentially a financial dispute within a marriage. Feeling frustrated yet determined, I realized that the police couldn't provide the resolution I sought. The next step was clear. I decided to seek legal assistance to address the betrayal and reclaim the substantial funds that had been taken from me. I needed a strategy not just for the immediate recovery of my assets, but to ensure that such a flagrant violation of trust and financial security could never happen again. As I moved forward, the path was fraught with legal complexities and emotional turmoil, but I was resolute. My journey to justice and financial independence was just beginning, and I was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I demanded compensation for the misappropriation of my $8 million savings, totaling $10 million in damages. Naturally, Matthew and his parents couldn't afford such a sum. In the end, they found themselves engulfed in debt. Despite their precarious financial situation, his parents continued their reckless spending, accumulating even more debt and eventually resorting to borrowing from loan sharks. They lived in constant fear of relentless debt collectors, always trying to stay out of sight. Contrary to their downward spiral, I made the bold decision to sever all ties with Matthew. I moved out and relocated to a new apartment, a fresh start that turned out to be the best decision for my peace of mind and career growth. Fortunately, my career began to thrive unexpectedly, and my income soon surpassed my wildest expectations. Since parting ways with Matthew, everything in my professional life seemed to fall perfectly into place. In hindsight, I regretted not divorcing him sooner. The failure of my marriage was a profound but valuable lesson. It taught me that my life was far from over and that I had the resilience to recover and rebuild. Taking lessons from this tumultuous experience, I resolved to exercise greater caution in my future endeavors, ensuring that my financial and emotional well-being was never compromised again. This period of my life, though fraught with challenges, underscored the importance of independence and the strength found in decisively moving forward from difficult situations.